Welcome back to OpenLine. We are talking mass transit in Nashville. Certainly a major issue. We'll be voting on this issue in May of next year. A lot of talk about what exactly we should do and how much it will cost. We have with us Erin Hafkenschiel with the Mayor's Office of Transportation and Sustainability, Walter Searcy with the Transit for Nashville, the spokesperson. Let's take some calls. Let's go to Marcus. Hello, Marcus.
Good evening to you and your guests. First of all, Mr. Searcy holds a lot of, as a young kid said, he's got the juice. He's a man of integrity and has been well known in the Nashville community for human rights and civil rights for a long time. So basically anything he says, I'm going to be probably on board with it. But basically, I wanted to know, and as the representative from the mayor's office, have they looked at the public safety aspect of a light rail system? Most cities that have light rail, they have a dedicated transit police department that's their primary function is to check for fare violators. That is a big thing. People are always trying to skip the fare either because they don't have the money or because they think it's cool to try to get over on the system. And so you need fare checkers to make sure everybody is paid for their fare. Also, you need a dedicated public safety transit police division, or are you going to take a part of the Metro Police Department and dedicate that to public safety? And that I'll hang up and listen. You guys have a good evening. And
Marcus.
by the way, the mayor's assistant looks just like the mayor herself. She's younger for some reason.
Okay. All right, Marcus, thank you for the call. Big fan of yours, apparently. All right, I think that's an interesting question. What about the security on the train? Who wants to take that?
It is a great question.
Yeah. So a sort of dedicated transit security force is absolutely part of the plan, and you know we've mentioned this a couple of times, but because there are so many cities that have done this before us, it becomes just a part of the model and a part of the costs that are incorporated into the sort of general operating costs for a system like this. So absolutely, there will be a dedicated security force both at stations and on the trains, and we won't be taking from MMPD.
Actually already have a small force of security officers that have police power and that are dedicated to Metro Transit, and that we'll just expand it. Obviously, is
expand that, but not take away from Metro Police. Okay, let's go to Brian. Hello, Brian.
Yeah, the girl on the left, what is her qualifications? She works for the mayor? Where does she go to school? It's bizarre. The guy on the right, I know him. And, whenever you start mass transit, I've spoke to Nick about this a lot, and the RTA director about, the Route 24 district, and I really don't understand the security. Whenever you get a mass transit plan like this, you get a lot of problems with security. You get a lot of problems with violent crime. I know, like downtown yesterday at the bus stop, 20 young youths attacking this nice woman, had nothing to do. You guys never talk about that. The thing is, I would love to see the relief of traffic, especially down Route 24 to Murfreesboro.
Right.
When I walk to Fairview, I have no problem, but I don't know. I just don't believe this. I just really don't understand. So
you question the whole plan?
No, not at all. Not at all. I love the plan. I think it's great. But security.
Okay, so your concern is the security.
Follows mass transit. That is a truism.
All right.
Have mercy.
I don't know. So we've had two questions about security. I think it's an interesting question about would it take from Metro Police. What if he has concerns about security? What do you say to alleviate his concerns?
I think statistically he's just off base on this one.
I think so.
All we have to do is look at the data and look at crime on the sidewalks versus crime on bus conveyances. And
Or
there's just no
if we're talking
comparison.
about safety, you know, one of the biggest issues is vehicle crashes and pedestrian fatalities. We know there were 40,000 deaths in the United States last year because of vehicle crashes involving both cars, bikers, and pedestrians. And cities that have a rail-based transit system have lower vehicle crashes and traffic fatalities sort of across the board.
And
So
lower insurance rates as a result.
I do think, you know, we were talking a little bit about, you know, cities that tried this for the first time in the 90s, and a lot of the conversation about light rail system is based off of some of those first tries, and I think that's where some of the violent crime conversations came from. What we're seeing is that that's not necessarily the case, that transit does not bring violent crime into neighborhoods. And it's actually the exact opposite. Walter and I were both today at the Transit and Affordability Task Force meeting that the mayor has just created, because everybody knows that where transit goes, that's where everybody wants to live. And housing prices go up, that's where jobs want to be, that's where economic development happens. So we actually have to make sure that we're protecting affordability along those corridors, not protecting it against violent crime or increases in security risks.
All right, so we had, you mentioned it, the AMP. It didn't pass. I mean, we don't have the AMP. And there were some of these same concerns brought up, also just the concern of the disruption during the phase of building. And that'll be an issue here too.
Sure.
So if there are people that are living in these corridors and they have maybe one concern about people coming in and a mass influx of people, or another concern about just what is this going to do to my life in the time that this is being built. What do you say about both of those concerns? And I guess what did we learn from the AMP when it comes to both of those concerns?
Well, of course, the AMP never got off the ground, literally or figuratively. And so there are certain lessons that it did not provide for us. I think it provided us more a lesson on how not to market the proposition. But in terms of the disruption, yes, there will be disruption, but it can be managed. In terms of access and egress by residents, all of these corridors are predominantly commercial corridors. They are not residential corridors. And so that may mean that I don't take my normal route into a town for a period of months. But you ask yourself, what's the trade-off? You know, what after it's done, you know, then what does that do for my overall quality of life?
And for your business.
Yeah. And if I'm in business, for my business, yes. If I am a consumer, same thing. You know, if I'm an employee that has been dealing with the hectic to and fro, high, what do we call it? High nerve quotient.
Stress levels.
Stress, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
High stress levels that come along with
Road rage.
or that results in road rage. And my goodness, you know, that gets us back to the safety issue. You know.
So when you said we've learned from the AMP, before we go to break, what have we learned from the AMP? What do we take away?
You know, I really think that the argument around the AMP had less to do with the project itself as to the approach that we took. Yep. I think the biggest lesson was that a lot of the complaints was that people didn't see how it fit into the whole region. And, you know, why should someone in Antioch be approving a bus rapid transit line on, you know, West End Avenue? And so the big lesson that we've learned from that is that we need to go to the community, we need to say what they want, we need to say what the vision is, and we've done that with NMotion. And that, you know, Let's Move Nashville is really based
That's
off
right.
of what we learned from NMotion.
Give the people what they want, and what they wanted is countywide,
right?
Not one narrow strip.
Right.
I believe with the
conveyance.
AMP, the thought was that it would eventually go countywide. But I guess what you're saying is people didn't see that. It's a good
Right.
in Antioch.
Very difficult to see.
Why are they going to have their taxes raised for something on West End? What you're doing here is you've laid out a bigger picture.
Right. And then I think the second really big issue is that people really learned what transit was during the AMP process. And so I don't think people could really make that trade-off between a disruption to my left turn lane that I use every single day in the same exact spot, or construction along that corridor, because they didn't know what they were going to be getting in the end. And we've now had that conversation as a community, I think, and people really do understand. We've said this again. Congestion is not getting any better. It's only going to get worse. And so, we have to make an investment now, and it's worth it for me to have these conversations about how to improve our transportation system across the county.
That would seem to be the best argument. There's no doubt traffic is not getting better, and everyone is frustrated with that. All right, we're going to take a break. If you want to call, a few lines open. There's a number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. Be back right after this.